Good evening. I'm about to start Treasure Island again, Chapter 12, Council of War. When we last left Jim Hawkins, he was hiding inside an apple barrel, and he just heard the pirates discussing their plot to take over the ship and kill all of the crew that were not pirates. Of course, what they wanted was the treasure that was there on Treasure Island. And the leader was Long John Silver. Now for the chapter. One other thing, the last thing that happened was they saw land. The lookout on the mast saw the island, Treasure Island, ahead of them. The captain had brought them there. There was a great rush of feet across the deck. I could hear people tumbling up from the cabin and the forecastle, that is from below decks, and slipping in an instant outside my barrel. I dived behind the foresail, made a double towards the stern, and came out upon the open deck in time to join Hunter and Dr. Livesey in the rush for the weather bow. Now the ship was pointed in the direction of the island, so everybody, all the crew, were rushing up from below decks, from on the deck. Everybody was going towards the front of the ship, which is the bow, to see the island. There, all hands were already congregated. A belt of fog had lifted almost simultaneously with the appearance of the moon. And in fact, that happens frequently. Over land, you often see fog when you're at sea. Or if you're looking out from land, you see fog over the sea. Away to the southwest of us, we saw two low hills, about a couple of miles apart, and rising behind one of them, a third and higher hill, whose peak was still buried in the fog. All three seemed sharp and conical in figure, which suggests volcanoes. So much I saw, almost in a dream, for I had not yet recovered from my horrid fear of a minute or two before. And then I heard the voice of Captain Smollett issuing orders. The Hispaniola was laid a couple of points nearer the wind, and now sailed the course that would just clear the island on the east. So he was just going to sail past the east side of the island. "And now, men," said the captain when all was sheeted home, "has any one of you ever seen that land ahead?" "I have, sir," said Silver. "I've watered there with a trader I was cook in." "The anchorage is on the south, behind an islet, I fancy?" asked the captain. "Yes, sir. Skeleton Island, they calls it. It were a main place for pirates once, and a hand we had on board knowed all their names for it. That hill to the nor'ard they calls Foremast Hill. There are three hills in a row running south'ard. Fore, main, and mizzen, sir. Now those are the names. That's what they call the three masts on the ship. The foremast, which is in the front, the main mast, which is the tallest mast in the middle of the ship, and the mizzen, which is the mast behind. The foremast and the mizzen are usually shorter than the main. But the main, that's the big one with the cloud on it. They usually calls the spyglass by reason of a lookout they kept when they was in the anchorage cleaning. Now, when the pirates would come in, they would anchor their ships in a safe place where there was a nice harbor where they could easily get to shore and where there was room for the ship. And for it's there they cleaned their ships, sir, asking your pardon. "I have a chart here," says Captain Smollett. "See if that's the place." Long John's eyes burned in his head as he took the chart. A chart is a map. "But by the fresh look of the paper, I knew he was doomed to disappointment. This was not the map we found in Billy Bones' chest, but an accurate copy, complete in all things, names and heights and soundings, that means how deep was the water around the island and where, with the single exception of the red crosses and the written notes, meaning they did not mark on this map where the treasure was hidden. Sharp as must have been his annoyance, Silver had the strength of mind to hide it. And of course, he did not know where the treasure was, and the island's about 9 or 10 miles long. That's a lot of place to look and a lot of places to dig. Yes, sir, said he, this is the spot to be sure, and very prettily drawn out. Who might have done that, I wonder? The pirates were too ignorant, I reckon. Aye, here it is, Captain Kidd's Anchorage. Just the name my shipmate called it. There's a strong current runs along the south. That's the ocean has a current like a river flowing along the south side of the island, and then away northward to the north, up the west coast. So that current runs along the south and then up the west side of the island. Right you was, sir, says he, to haul your wind and keep the weather of the island. They were sailing down the east side away from, so they weren't going to run into the current. Leastwise, if such was your intention as to enter and careen, and there ain't no better place for that in these waters. I think he means by that they would be cleaning the ship, the hull of the ship. They had to scrape it down and repaint and prepare it for sailing again. Thank you, my man, says Captain Smollett. I'll ask you later on to give us a help. You may go. I was surprised at the coolness with which John avowed his knowledge of the island, and I own I was half frightened when I saw him drawing nearer to myself. He did not know, to be sure, that I'd overheard his counsel from the apple barrel, and yet I had by this time taken such a horror of his cruelty, duplicity, and power that I could scarce conceal a shudder when he laid his hand upon my arm. In short, what he's saying, Long John Silver was a very strong man, a very cruel man, and a very lying person. He was not reliable, not trustworthy. He had his own agenda. He knew what he wanted, and he was going after it. Ah, says he, this here is a sweet spot, this island. A sweet spot for a lad to get ashore on. You'll bathe, and you'll climb trees, and you'll hunt goats, you will. And you'll get aloft on them hills like a goat yourself. Why, it makes me young again. I was going to forget my timber leg, I was. His wooden leg. It's a pleasant thing to be young and have 10 toes, and you may lay to that. When you want to go a bit of exploring, you just ask old John, and he'll put up a snack for you to take along, a nice picnic lunch. And clapping me in the friendliest way upon the shoulder, he hobbled off forward and went below. Captain Smollett, the squire, and Dr. Livesey were talking together on the quarterdeck at the back of the ship, towards the stern, and anxious as I was to tell them my story, I durst not interrupt them openly, while I was still casting about in my thoughts to find some probable excuse. After all, he was just the cabin boy and needed an excuse to talk to the captain and the squire and Dr. Livesey. Dr. Livesey called me to his side. He'd left his pipe below, and being a slave to tobacco had meant that I should fetch it. But as soon as I was near enough to speak and not to be overheard by anyone else, I broke out immediately. "Doctor, let me speak. Get the captain and squire down to the cabin, and then make some pretense to send for me. I have terrible news." The doctor changed countenance a little, but next moment he was master of himself. He understood that he had to keep this a secret. "Thank you, Jim," said he quite loudly. "That was all I wanted to know," as if he had asked me a question. And with that he turned on his heel and rejoined the other two. They spoke together for a little, and though none of them started or raised his voice or so much as whistled, it was plain enough that Dr. Livesey had communicated my request. For the next thing that I heard was the captain giving an order to Job Anderson, and all hands were piped on deck. "My lads," said Captain Smollett, "I have a word to say to you. This land that we have sighted is the place we have been sailing to. Mr. Trelawney, being a very open-handed gentleman, as we all know, has just asked me a word or two, and I was able to tell him that every man on board had done his duty alow and aloft, as I never asked to see it done better. Why, he and I and the doctor are going below to the cabin to drink your health and luck, and you'll have grog served out for you to drink our health and luck. I'll tell you what I think of this. I think it handsome, and if you think as I do, you'll give a good sea cheer for the gentleman that does it. Hooray!" The cheer followed. That was a matter of course, Not every day that you get an extra ration of grog, but it rang out so full and hearty that I confess I could hardly believe these same men were plotting for our blood. "One more cheer for Captain Smollett," cried Long John when the first had subsided. "Hooray!" And this also was given with a will. On the top of that, the three gentlemen went below, and not long after, word was sent forward that Jim Hawkins was wanted in the cabin. I found them all three seated round the table, a bottle of Spanish wine and some raisins before them, and the doctor smoking away with his wig on his lap. Remember, they all wore wigs in those days. Gentlemen wore wigs, and that, I knew, was a sign that he was agitated. He was worried and nervous. The stern window was open. That is, this cabin opened out to the rear of the boat, so there was a big window running across the width of the boat, and when it was open, you could get a little air. For it was a warm night, and you could see the moon shining behind on the ship's wake. "Now, Hawkins," said the squire, "you have something to say. Speak up." I did as I was bid, and as short as I could make it, told the whole details of Silver's conversation. Nobody interrupted me till I was done, nor did any of the three of them make so much as a movement, but they kept their eyes upon my face from first to last. "Jim," said Dr. Livesey, "take a seat." And they made me sit down at table beside them, poured me out a glass of wine, filled my hands with raisins, and all three, one after the other, and each with a bow, drank my good health and their service to me for my luck and courage, meaning, "Thank you, Jim, you just saved our lives," or at least we've got a chance of saving our lives. "Now, Captain," said the squire, "you were right, and I was wrong. I own myself an ass, and I await your orders." "No more an ass than I, sir," returned the captain. I never heard of a crew that meant a mutiny, but what showed signs before, for any man that had an eye in his head to see the mischief and take steps according. But this crew, he added, beats me. Captain, said the doctor, with your permission, that's Silver, a very remarkable man. He'd look remarkably well from a yardarm, sir, returned the captain, meaning it'd be nice to hang him. But this is talk. This don't lead to anything. I see 3 or 4 points, and with Mr. Trelawney's permission, I'll name them. You, sir, are the captain. It is for you to speak, says Mr. Trelawney grandly, giving up his right as the owner of the ship, his privilege. First point, began Captain Smollett. We must go on, because we can't turn back. If I give the word to go about, meaning to turn around, they would rise at once. Second point, we have time before us, at least until this treasure's found. Third point, there are faithful hands, meaning there are some people, some of the crew are not mutineers. They haven't joined with the pirates. Now, sir, it's got to come to blows sooner or later, meaning they're going to end up with a fight. And what I propose is to take time by the forelock. This is the forelock, as the saying is, and come to blows some fine days when they least expect it. We can count, I take it, on your own home servants, Mr. Trelawney. As upon myself, declared the squire. 3, reckoned the captain. Ourselves make 7, counting Hawkins here. Now the captain is counting up the number of people who are likely to be on their side. So he's counting the 3 of themselves as 3, and the 3 servants whom Mr. Trelawney brought with him as another 3 who will be on their side. That's 6. And then with Jim Hawkins, that's 7 people on their side. Now, about the honest hands. Most likely Trelawney's own men, said the doctor, those he had picked up for himself before he lit on Silver. Nay, replied the squire, Hands was one of mine. You'll remember that's Israel Hands, who turned out to be a drunkard and went overboard one night. I did think I could have trusted Hands, added the captain. And to think they're all Englishmen, broke out the squire. Sir, I could find it in my heart to blow the ship up. Meaning he's so disappointed that Englishmen could be pirates and could conspire against other Englishmen. Well, gentlemen, said the captain, the best that I can say is not much. We must lay to, if you please, and keep a bright lookout. That is to say, they have to lie quiet, not let on that they know, but stay very aware of what's going on. It's trying on a man, I know. It would be pleasanter to come to blows, easier and quicker, and then you know where you stand. But there's no help for it till we know our men. Lay to and whistle for a wind, that's my view. Jim here, said the doctor, can help us more than anyone. Excuse me. The men are not shy with him, and Jim is a noticing lad. He's got eyes in his head, and he sees. Hawkins, I put prodigious faith in you, added the squire. I began to feel pretty desperate at this, for I felt altogether helpless. And yet, by an odd train of circumstances or events, it was indeed through me that safety came. In the meantime, talk as we pleased, There were only 7 out of the 26 on whom we knew we could rely. And out of these 7, 1 was a boy, so that the grown men on our side were 6 to their 19. End of chapter 12, and we'll pick up with part 3 in a day or so. Thank you for listening.